Jason Rzucidlo reporting from the Ford Conference and Event Center in Dearborn for the Driving Change Conference. Stay tuned for remarks from panelists in the Automotive, Manufacturing, and Technology Job session.
So for me, this was a real opportunity to be invited to talk with you about trends in engineering education. And so this morning in particular, have been hearing a lot about what you're seeing from the industry side of technology development, what the implications are for that, possibly in the workforce development, what the needs are, what are the major areas where there are advances that are perhaps going to bring about either gradual or probably more likely really radical changes in what is needed in the auto industries themselves. And what I'm going to talk about are this isn't changing, guys. What I'm going to talk about are what at first, from a very high level, what I would say a 30,000-foot level, what are the major trends in engineering education today? What changes are we seeing compared to the curricula, the pedagogies, the kinds of education, the expectations for our students? And then bring that down to a level a little bit closer to earth to talk about what are some of these specific examples that we're seeing today, and in particular the ones that are most germane to the kinds of education that we were hearing about this morning in terms of preparation for this workforce, for this industry, for the kinds of innovations that we're seeing. And I can probably do some of this from off the top of my head, but I don't know if I can do all of it off the top of my head. How do you want to proceed here? Okay. So let me tell you where I think we're going to go. So this notion of 30,000-foot view, what are the things that have? I would say that the past, coming up on 15 years, higher education has actually, especially higher education in engineering, has seen some pretty dramatic changes in what is expected of us. There have been some seminal reports that have really tried to shine a bright light on how are we succeeding in higher education and engineering, but what places have we not been succeeding? One of the forces that really pushed all of us along, engineering is one of the disciplines where accreditation is a big deal. And so the ABET, the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, in the late 1990s, released what were called EC 2000. These were the Engineering Criteria 2000. And what they did was, for the first time, said, not only is this a nice thing, but if you're going to be an accredited engineering program, you have to do these things. And it said, we know that you need to educate students with technical skills. If you're in electrical engineering or computer engineering or materials and mechanical engineering, there are technical bodies of knowledge that you must educate your students in. And for a vast majority of certainly of the major universities in this part of the country, the Big Ten universities, for example, we do this and have done this for a long time. So I'm going to just quickly run through what are some of these drivers for change. Why has higher education and engineering been changing and continuing to change over the past roughly 15 years? And then come down to earth some and look at some of the specific details that we're seeing, especially as they pertain to things that touch most directly on the auto industry. So change. There are changes that are happening because of the pace of acceleration of technologies. A lot of sources about rate of change of knowledge. Some of it's measured in terms of physics concepts like half-life. How long is it before half of what anybody knows in a technology field or technical field is obsolete? Or how long does it take before the amount of technical knowledge doubles? It's definitely less than 5 years. I've seen estimates at this point that say that it's 2 years. these are all scary for us who are building curricula and trying to think about content of our courses. But it also perhaps makes us think that content can't be the only thing we worry about, because the content's going to be obsolete pretty quickly. And so this question about what are we doing to help students learn has suddenly become far more important in how we think about education. Workforce studies saying that in 10 years, 90% of what an engineer knows will be available on the computer. So who needs the engineer? And that 60% of future jobs will require training that only 20% of the current workforce possesses. A number of calls to action. The National Academy reports Engineer 2020 is definitely the one that has shaped this conversation. But the others that are interesting are the ones like the Rising Above the Gathering Storm, the writings Tom Friedman's World is Flat, some of the work that has come out of the Innovate America and the America Competes Act, framing this need to do a different job of educating our students in terms of national competitiveness. And the one caution with that is that as you go around the world, to Europe, but to China, Peru, Namibia, Colombia, pretty much any country you can name, and ask them, what are they doing? They are building an innovation economy. They're working on their education systems to try to have a culture that is more innovative. They are looking at the same things. And so it's not a given that this is all going to succeed. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this Engineer 2020 report, because the good news is it will go really quickly, because it has an amazing resonance and overlap with many of the things you heard this morning from the industry perspective about what's driving the way that industry leaders are thinking, but they're also driving the way that academia is thinking in these realms. So the Engineer 2020 report frames engineering education in a number of contexts. First, in a technological context. And it talks about the breakthrough technologies, the bio, nano, material science and photonics, information and communications, information explosion. What do you do with that? And the need for logistics. And also talks about some of the key technological challenges in terms of the urban physical infrastructure, the information and communications infrastructure, and the aging population, and what that means to have technology for an aging population, leading to the conclusion that solutions will be interdisciplinary, that it will be important to be able to understand complexity, and that it will be critical to be able to bring a systems perspective. We've heard all this before. The report also frames engineering in a non-engineering world. Says, where does engineering education and where do engineering sit in the societal context, globally, professional contexts? Again, we talked about this morning, the population, 8 to 9 billion people in urban centers, the changing workforce demographics, the aging population, the accelerating global economy, customization. What do consumers want and what do they expect? As the technology gets more advanced, this ability to personalize, and so now the expectation that everything is personalized. Importance in areas we all know, health, healthcare delivery, security, but an increasing convergence of engineering and public policy. And certainly when we talk about sustainability, this is one of the areas where engineering and public policy have to be interacting and intersecting in order for there to be advances. And also a part that has to do with the public understanding of engineering. That your consumers are consumers of advanced products, but there are actually decisions that consumers can be making about something's on the smart grid. What does that mean? How does that affect my energy consumption? I'm trading off energy consumption in one form of vehicle, but I'm perhaps consuming energy someplace else. And so potentially a more active role for a public that understands some of how this technology works.